So we're going to begin this morning with a story for the children, and a very common story, but one that you might relate to a bit more now. You know, not too long ago, we probably wouldn't be able to identify very well with the idea of Noah and his family being shut in this ark, this big boat, for 150 days. They weren't allowed to go outside because it was raining. It was a flood outside. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights, but it took 150 days for them before they were able to go back out onto dry land. So right now we might be thinking, well, we've been stuck in our houses for a really long time, and that probably feels pretty similar. But what we're going to look at in this story is, are there ways that we can think differently, that we can act differently, that can help us even become better people while we're kind of stuck? This is chapter 8 in the book of Genesis. Then God remembered Noah and every living thing and all of the animals that were with him in the ark. And God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters subsided. The fountains of the deep and the windows of heaven were also stopped, and the rain from heaven was restrained. And the waters receded continually from the earth. At the end of 150 days, the waters decreased. Then the ark rested in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, on the mountains of Ararat. And the waters decreased continually until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the 1st day of the month, the tops of the mountains were seen. So it came to pass at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark, which he had made, and he sent out a raven, which kept on going to and fro until the waters dried up from the earth. He also sent out from himself a dove to see if the waters had receded from the face of the ground. But the dove found no resting place for the sole of her foot, so she returned to him in the ark, for the waters were on the face of the whole earth. So he put out his hand and took her and drew her into the ark to himself. And he waited yet another 7 days, and again he sent out the dove from the ark. Then the dove came to him in the evening, and behold, a freshly plucked olive leaf was in her mouth. And Noah knew that the waters had receded from the earth. So he had waited another 7 days and sent out the dove, which did not return again to him anymore. And it came to pass in the 601st year in the month, the 1st day of the month, that the waters were dried up from the earth, and Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked, and indeed the surface of the ground was dry. Following this, in verse 20, it says, Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and took of every clean animal and every clean bird, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And the Lord smelled the soothing aroma. And then the Lord said in his heart, I will never curse the ground for man's sake, although the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Nor will I again destroy every living thing as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, day and night shall not cease. So again, we can imagine being stuck in this one place in our house and just not feeling very good about life, and not feeling like we can go play with our friends. We can't go to school in the same way, and it's really frustrating. It can be really frustrating and worrying. Maybe some of us are anxious and worried about what the future might be like. And what I want to draw our attention to in this story is actually the birds that Noah sends out of the ark to find out if the flood had ended. Now, there are two different kinds of bird. The first one was a raven, and it said that the raven went out and it just kept flying to and fro and to and fro until the waters had dried up from the ground. And this is kind of like the way our thoughts might work. Sometimes when we're thinking just about me and my thoughts and what I want and how things are going, and I want to go outside, I want to play, I want this stuff to be over, I don't want to be anxious or worried, it's like our thoughts just flying around and not knowing anything and just flying and not doing any good. But then that raven never comes back, but instead, Noah sends out a dove. Now, if you're a child that comes to our church, we gave these little dove ornaments for Christmas a couple of years ago. And this is because a dove represents the Lord's Spirit. The Lord's thoughts, like when we think from the Lord, it's kind of like sending out the dove. So there's two different ways to think. We can think from our own heads and from our own hearts, from our own selfish thoughts, from our own things that we want, or we can think from the Lord's thoughts, all of the good and true things that he gives in our word, which is what the dove represents. And this is really important for our story because the dove shows Noah when it's actually safe to go out of the ark. So even though the dove first goes out and can't find anywhere to land, it comes back to Noah. So we also might be thinking from the Lord and trying to figure out, well, what am I supposed to do, Lord? And we might go out and try to do something, and maybe it doesn't work so well. Or maybe it's not safe yet to go back out. And so the dove returns, and he sends it out another time. And this time it brings back an olive leaf. So this is like us going out and trying to do something good and finding out that we enjoy it, that we actually love doing what the Lord teaches us. And finally, the dove shows on the third time that it's completely safe, that the Lord is there protecting us and caring for us. And just think about that. Noah and his family were protected from this huge flood. Yes, it was a very scary thing. They were in this boat for a really long time. They couldn't see out. It must have been really dark. But the Lord protected them. And this is another thing we can think about in this story of Noah's ark when it ends. When Noah comes out of the ark, the very first thing that Noah does is he builds an altar to the Lord, that he worships the Lord. And maybe this is a practice, one of the ways that we can think more from the Lord, to live more like the dove, is that every evening before we go to bed, even if we had a hard day, can we think of at least one thing we can be grateful for to the Lord? And in our prayers, maybe thank the Lord. That's like building an altar, thanking the Lord for his safety, for his protection, for his goodness, and for everything that's really good in our lives. So that is our talk for the children this morning. Now for a blessing on the children. The Lord give his angels charge over you to keep you in all your ways. Amen.